Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking with Anthony Sullivan. He's actually one of my mentors in my current job at Humana. And even though our jobs aren't actually that closely related, we've had some really good conversations over the past year or so. And I realized that I hadn't actually talked to him about what his job actually is. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to get to know that a little bit better. So, we're going to hear about his job as a cloud infrastructure engineer or cloud infrastructure manager. And if you, as always, if you've got any questions for him, leave them down in the comments. It goes without saying, but it's a good reminder that as we talk about our jobs here, obviously we're not representing Humana or the views of Humana, even though we both work there. This really is just a career conversation, and it doesn't represent Humana overall. Although we do talk about some of the really great benefits from working at Humana, so keep an eye open for those. Don't forget to subscribe and follow along for more. Okay, who are you and what do you do?
So my name's Anthony Sullivan. I am an associate director of cloud infrastructure, which is a title I never thought I would have because I spent most of my career in software development and infrastructure wasn't my bag. But yeah, what does that mean? I lead a group of extremely talented and brilliant engineers. When I say that, I'm not just patting these guys on the back. We're L3, which is the top level of support. So if anything is really, 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 really broken, they call us. So these are kind of principal level engineers.
Okay, and so now you're the boss. Tell us a little bit about how you got to your position, and then we'll go into the details of what you actually do every day.
Sure. So how far do you want me to go back? Because I could go back to like when Anthony was like, you know, couldn't grow a beard, or to when I started at my current position.
Let's start from college or your education and kind of where you went
Okay,
from there.
that's an interesting story, and this is gonna probably. I've watched a little bit of your channel. I've watched some of your videos. Kind of got the feel for what you're trying to accomplish here, and as I think about how this interview is going to go, it's probably I don't know. It should be interesting.
Okay, great. Looking forward
Um,
to it. This is going to be good.
so when I started in technology, I started as a and it wasn't even in technology. I started as a data entry clerk for a subrogation firm, which is subrogation is the process in which insurance companies secure funds from other insurance companies when they have covered a claim that they feel they shouldn't have had to cover. So if you get hurt in a car wreck, your health insurance pays for your health insurance. They pay for your hospital stay, but the car insurance is really responsible for that. And subrogation is the process of the car insurance, or rather the health insurance, making the car insurance pay them back. It's a really exciting field. I definitely recommend it. No, it's the most boring stuff. But I was doing
Especially data entry, right? Or you just like literally typing in numbers.
yeah, typing in claim information, that sort of stuff. It was just monumentally boring. Um,
Okay.
but it was also something I was good at because this was the '90s, late '90s, and if you were a fast typer, you were a commodity. And so I could type because I was a nerd. I'd grown up playing with computers, and so I got this opportunity to do some data entry. It was basically minimum wage job, but I got all my work done in half the day. So I was there for 8 hours, but about halfway through the day, I was done with all my entry. And the one guy he was a one man IT shop who ran the IT for this pretty large law firm. With subrogation firm is a law firm, effectively. Um, he noticed that I was doing a lot of thumb twiddling. He's like, "Hey,
Uh-huh.
man, he and I talked a little bit. He knew I was kind of a techie. He's like, if I can get clearance, do you want to kind of help me? Because I've got a lot to do and I'm only one guy." I'm like, dude, that sounds fantastic. So he got the opportunity for me to spend half my day changing out modems and stuff and computers and whatnot, and that was just the most exciting opportunity I'd had as a young man, and that was that company I was working for is an interesting story, and I'll spare you the details there. But ultimately lost that job because what as kind of a slap on the back for me helping him out because they couldn't give me more money. He gave me
Oh yeah.
he gave me access to the internet on my terminal, which I wasn't supposed to have. And the boss walked by one day and saw me browsing this very, very risky site. It's called hotmail.com. Uh, so this is the 90s, right? Hotmail hadn't been bought by Microsoft yet. Nobody really knew what it was unless you were a nerd who, used digital email. And so I got called into the office and basically read my rights for accessing the internet when I wasn't supposed to, and they cut me loose, which really sucked. It's really sucked. It's the first time I'd ever been fired. I mean, I was like
Yeah.
19 years old, but it was not cool. But the guy who I helped wrote me a letter of recommendation. And he'd been in the industry here in the city for a long time. So he was, I wouldn't say he was like widely known and respected, but he knew some people. And so he wrote me a letter of recommendation that got me my next three jobs, which was really cool. So I kind of bounced around in a few different opportunities, and then I got hired on as doing answering phones as a call support or phone support tech at this really small company that did support for a software package called Goldmine, and that I was there like 3 weeks, and this was a company of a president, like a lead tech guy, really sharp tech guy, and a secretary and me. That was it. And so they
Okay.
were all client facing. They all go out to clients. They do work at clients. Very salesy, but also highly technical. And I was answering the phone, and the technology guy, the real sharp engineer fella, he after I was there 3 weeks, he's like, "I'm quitting. This opportunity hasn't panned out to what I expected it to be. Gave it 3 years. I got to go do some real stuff. This nerd you got answering the phones, he's got chops. Give him a shot." And of course, the guy Don Eds, that was the president, was like, "Well, what am I going to do? I have to give somebody a shot. I'm going to give you a shot." And he's talking to me. He's
Yeah.
like, "I'm going to give you a shot. If you suck at this, you can go back to answering the phones. But if you don't, here's a new opportunity." And so I spent the next like 2 weeks, like I would work all day. I would go home and just read and just read and just pour over technical books. And these are back, maybe you don't remember these days. Back then we didn't have Google and SourceForge. We had
Yeah.
Rocks Press, like 400 page, books that were out of, technology was already stale by the time it got in your hands. That's how we learned. So yeah, that was history. I worked there for probably 6 or 7 years, and then finally I kind of got in the same boat as that guy did. I knew I was worth a lot more at that point, and I knew I
Yeah.
was never going to achieve that there. And so that's when I got my first contracting gig as a software developer. And I went from making like maybe like $24,000 a year to making $50,000 a year, just one jump.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a no brainer. You couldn't not do that.
Right.
And so then it's just one developer job after another. It's I've always been a pretty loyal person in terms of the companies I work for. I want to grow within the space I'm in, and so I worked for that company as a contractor for a few years, and then they hired me on, and then I was there for, gosh, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. Sounds about right. And then I bounced around a little bit between a couple of small different companies, and I ended up at a large healthcare organization, not where I'm at today. I work at one today as well, and I was there for 14 years, and I grew from a probably intermediate level developer to a senior developer to a team lead, a scrum master, which is kind of a weird shift off of the development path, but that was kind of how their leadership path went at that company. Um, and to a manager there. And then I jumped out of there and thought, I was like, man, I'm worth a lot more. It's time to make a move. And so I was there for 14 years, and I went and worked for a Microsoft startup, or not startup, but Microsoft consultancy, a regional
Okay.
consultancy. So this is, several hundred engineers, servicing, kind of a tri-state area. And I was a sales architect there. I didn't love that job. Uh,
Yeah.
it was a job where I got to think about technology a lot, but I didn't get to do technology a lot, and that was not fun. And then I got poached out of there to come work for the company I work for now, Humana. So
Nice.
a guy I worked with at Kindred, the other healthcare company, he he had landed over at Humana, and he's like, "Hey, you got to come work for Humana." And I'll be honest with you, and I'll tell this to anybody I worked at Humana or not. Humana was one of those companies when I was working anywhere else in Louisville. Uh, I never wanted to work there. I'd heard
Yeah.
so many horror stories, and so when he called me, he's like, I want you to come work for me. I'm building this cool cloud team. It's going to be great. I'm like, man, it's just not my bag. I don't want to work. I don't want to work for that company. And he's like, just come have a beer with me. Let me tell you about it. And yeah, I was apparently pliable after a beer or two, and the rest is history.
So, okay, I have so many questions. That this sounds like the glory days of the tech nerd back in the 90s, kind of growing up in your career. But let's kind of go backwards for that first, because I just have to mention when I started working at Humana, it was also kind of getting poached from a friend that I had previously. In my case, it was a friend from graduate school who was working at Humana. We were in an aerospace engineering lab, but he got a job at Humana as a data scientist and said, "This is great." And I could tell before I joined, and of course, since after I've joined, that the benefits here compared to the kinds of work that I was doing before, it's just so much more flexible and so much better for my mental health and life,
Sure.
right? Anyway, let's now talk about your job today. What is it that you usually do in a given work day? I imagine it's not the old IT days of pulling cables and installing modems anymore. But what do you actually do every day?
So me specifically, it's just meetings. It's so many meetings. So I'm a very well relative to my peers. So other associate directors, specifically at Humana, in our engineering space. I would like to say that I'm a pretty technical uh, AD. There are certainly people in that space who they're not they don't, it's not that they don't understand the technology, but they're more of a 50,000 foot view person. I
Yeah,
like to
right.
get my hands dirty. I like to get into the technology. And so, you know, reading through your outline, there's a few different questions around that kind of butt up to this, right? So
Yeah.
meetings, definitely that. But those meetings, they run the gamut from some of them around just procedural meetings around just managing people, right? So it might be one-on-ones, it might be meetings with, HR, not negative meetings, but rather because they have regular office hours and things like that, where they will let us know about changes in policies and procedures, et cetera. And then there's also meetings with, your leader. But outside of that, you've got meetings with what I think you call them clients in this outline, but our
Uh-huh.
customers, right? The people who
Sure.
consume the services that we provide. Um, those meetings are they run the gamut as well. Sometimes they're, hey, we're talking about a particular initiative. We're talking about the work that's getting done or the work that we're trying to plan to get done. But other times it's a meeting where they're trying to make me understand why their work is more important than all of my other customers. So that's always a fun call.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Um, and then there's the fun meetings, and this will butt into yeah, another question that you have is that a lot of my time is spent protecting my team. And I don't mean protecting them from enemies and scallywags, but rather protecting them from the minutia and uh,
Right.
and context switching because you know John Doe over here definitely wants to talk to my lead architect who's got a day and a half full worth of work he has to get done today. Um, and I spend a lot of my time protecting them. Now, what's that protection look like? Sometimes it's telling that guy to go pound sand. Listen, get in line. But other
Yeah.
times it's work I can do, right? And
Right. Yeah.
that's the work that excites me because I like to get my hands dirty. I'm like, okay, well, listen, I could send you to the end of the line, but I actually know how to knock that out really quick. Let me take care of that for you. But it's just meetings, and then as a technology leader, you've got other things going on. Like right now, I have kind of two different what called RFP, request for proposal processes that are in flight, where we're trying to pick a technology and determine amongst in number of participants, which one's the best fit for our purpose, criteria, our requirements, and enterprise scale, because a lot of these things sound really great on paper, but then you put them up against a Fortune 50 company and you say, okay, can you really do this? And then they're like, okay, well, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not a great fit.
Yeah. So, okay, here's something I've been thinking about then. Well, first I'll say I appreciate that viewpoint from a leader or a manager of being a protector or helper or serving your team by making sure that they can do their job the best way possible. The bosses that I've had that have really kind of understood that, it's been kind of a better work experience for me, instead of just kind of leaning back and saying, you do this, you do this, you do this, and instead enabling them to kind of do their best stuff at work. So anyway, I just want to point that out.
Well, I'll tell you where that comes from, and before you dive into your next question,
Yeah.
from my stint as a Scrum Master. Um, well, I mean, certainly personal experience as well, right? I've worked for
Right.
leaders. I've worked for both those leaders you described, but being a Scrum Master, which is literally a servant leader, was the most informative piece of my career to the leader I am today.
Yeah. Do you prefer Scrum as a planning or development structure, or are there other ways that you think it can be done better?
Well, I think that perfect Scrum as it's prescribed, it doesn't work anywhere. I've worked in multiple software development houses that leveraged agile principles. None of them do it perfectly, and they don't do it
Yep.
perfectly because perfect doesn't work for them. But that's kind of the beauty of Scrum and Agile, is that it's an iterative process that allows you to improve upon it on some sort of cadence, whatever your iteration cycle is, and make it better and make it more yours, because some things don't make a lot of sense, right? You might not think that. Well, I'm going to say this, but I tell everyone this: don't skip the retros. The retros is where you learn.
Yeah.
But some people might say, well, a weekly or sprint a retro every sprint doesn't work for us. We don't learn enough in a sprint to make a retro valuable. Okay, we'll do one every other. Okay, now you're not doing perfect sprint or perfect scrum, and some agile police will show up and tell you how you're not doing it right. But the reality
Yeah.
is that do it the way that works for you, and I think you'll have good outcomes.
Yeah. During my last job, when I was waiting for a special access clearance, the company was trying to implement Scrum and Agile. And since I had nothing to do at work, I had like a whole year of just Agile indoctrination. Um, and I totally agree with you. One other thing I think is that people misunderstand what you're talking about when you say agile or when you say scrum. And often it's the case that if you say we're going to do this agile, people automatically think, oh, we're going to do scrum or we're going to do safe or whatever other versions there are, right?
Right.
And I think maybe just because I'm pedantic, it's very important to understand agile is like those commandments where you can look it up online. The guys who
The
got together in Park
manifesto.
City, in the manifesto. That's right,
That's right.
and that's it, right? It doesn't say any project management rules or meeting schedule or whatever, right? And then Scrum is a good implementation of those principles specifically for software development. And if that's what you're doing, you can follow it pretty much to the T and it works pretty well. And if you're designing a rocket, it's you gotta be a little anyway. I could
Oh,
go on
you're
and for
absolutely right.
hours about that.
Absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit more just what cloud infrastructure actually means. This is not a major that was available when I was in college. Like, where does that come from? Is that something that people do specifically, or is this kind of a branch off of computer science or IT, or where does it kind of fit in?
So cloud infrastructure as a position or team, et cetera, is really a large enterprise concept, because
Okay.
small companies and development shops tend to encompass what I do or what my team does in what you would call full stack development. So when you talk to people, they talk about a full stack developer. A true full stack developer knows everything from the code they write to the front end design work, all the way down to the backend API, and then the DevOps behind that, which is the kind of the yeah. So in a small company, they what they're delivering is a workload. They're delivering a website, a piece of software to something. Maybe it's a Kubernetes cluster, maybe it's a web server in their data center or whatever, or in today's world, very likely they're delivering it to the cloud. And the cloud, that has to live in some infrastructure. So in the cloud infrastructure space, that might look like in Azure, that might look like an app service, which is a kind of a containerized environment for your web app to live. It might be multiple of those if they have a multi-tier application where they have an API layer, maybe a controller layer, and then a front end. So when we're talking about a large enterprise, we want to do things in standard ways. We want to do things in a way that is consistent across the entire organization. There's lots of value to doing that. There's also drawbacks to doing that. The values to
Yep.
do it, I think, are pretty obvious, right? We have a single understanding of how we do things, which means every engineer that supports that infrastructure knows how we do it. They don't have to think about how we do it here or how this workload team does it, or et cetera. They know that's how we in our organization do that thing. And that's conventionally very important to keep support costs down, and also lowers risk, because if there's 10 different ways to do a thing, then the engineer supporting that in that moment maybe they don't know about the ninth way to do it, or maybe they assume that it's the eighth way because another engineer told them about it one time, and they're like, oh yeah, I think I remember they're doing it the eighth way, and then they fix it the way it's the eighth way, but they're doing it the ninth way, so they're fixing it in the wrong way. They're causing additional problems rather than
Yeah.
solving it with one way. So standardizing infrastructure across an organization is very important from that perspective, but it has drawbacks too, right? Because let's say you have 40 application teams across your organization that are all trying to produce software, and you have varying levels of skill set. You have guys who are like, I'm a Microsoft guy, and another guy's I'm a Linux guy, and another guy's like, hey, have you guys heard of Oracle? You know, these you have all of these different personalities and approaches, technological acumen, where they're like, some are really sharp in the cloud, and other ones are like, I wrote it last thing I wrote was an ASP site that ran on a Windows 98 box under my secretary's desk. Those different perspectives all have a different understanding and desire around how much they want to control. And when an enterprise says, nope, this is the way we're doing it standard across the board, some of those people are going to be annoyed. Some of those
Yeah.
people are going to be very enabled because they don't know how to do that. And if you didn't tell them how it was going to be done, they wouldn't get done. So it's six, it's really a give and take there in terms of value, but it's essential in a large organization. So we
Yeah.
deliver that infrastructure. We deliver the foundational networking to make sure that networking or that network traffic is private and secure. And obviously in a healthcare organization, that's very critical.
Yep.
And then my team is also responsible for any new capabilities. So if a cloud offers something new, so AI has been really hot, right? I don't know if you've heard about this thing called AI. It's pretty big. You should check it out.
Yep.
But all of the different clouds have their own offering, right? And so we as an organization need to decide, well, which one do we think is most valuable? Which one fits best into our industry, has best offerings for healthcare, and then we have to enable that for the organization rather than just turning everyone loose. Say, hey, go do AI stuff. We have to say, okay, how is Humana going to do AI? What's
Yeah.
the infrastructure for that? And that's the sort of things that my team is involved in.
Yeah. I I feel that pendulum swing between standardization and being able to customize, like, often at work. For instance, I love Databricks. I love working in Databricks, which is what most of my job is nowadays. And especially once they integrated the AI assistant, either they integrated it or they allowed it, whatever. Um, that's cut my development time in half, because instead of go into Stack Exchange to make sure I get the right function or whatever. I just say, do this, and then it spits out the code to do that. And sometimes I have to adjust it because it got
Right.
a name wrong or whatever. But it's super fast. On the other hand, recently they uninstalled Jupyter notebooks, or the Anaconda install of Python,
Hmm.
because now there's a rule that you have to be part of a certain IT group if you're going to have that. And yeah, I can do everything in Databricks and it's fine, but for the thing I was trying to do, it was like working on a 30 by 10 table, just making some graphs or something. And I'm like, I could do this in 30 seconds on my local machine, but you took away the tool. And anyway, so I feel that. And I, on part of it, I don't envy you, being the person that has to make decisions like that for the whole company.
Well, I didn't make that decision. So
Okay, great.
just so we're clear, desktops is somebody else. But yeah, and the funny thing is that I feel the pain as well, because as it
Hmm.
turns out, as part of my 6 years now at Humana, I have I've identified gaps in tooling and things that we just can't do well, and so I happened to have a very talented web developer that joined my team a while back, and so we wrote an application. We wrote this thing's called Cloud Platform Toolbox, which is we had a way more inventive name that got shot down by legal. But anyway, that's this suite of tools that allows us to do all sorts of cool things. But it's a web app. It's deployed to our cloud environment, which means I am constantly. I say It's really I'm just largely hearing about it because my developer is the guy who really has to
Hmm.
deal with this. But we're constantly dealing with the controls, security controls, all the different guardrails, if you will, that exist in a large enterprise that sometimes make it feel like they don't want us to succeed.
Yeah,
It
right.
really feels that way sometimes, and it's very interesting to live on both sides of that fence.
Yeah. Every once in a while, it's just like, don't you people get it? We need this. Or like, who thought that this rule would be a good idea?
Yeah,
I know what you mean. Yeah. So cloud infrastructure. This isn't like I was saying, a college major that someone would go into, but as you kind of gain experience, it might make sense for someone who started in software like you, or IT like you, to kind of make their way into that organization in whatever big company. And like you were saying, it doesn't even exist in most smaller companies. There's no need for a whole organization around cloud infrastructure. Am I tracking? Is that all?
that's absolutely true. And I would say I would add on to that the skill sets that my engineers have, they're very cloud centric, right? Their foundation the foundation of their skills is cloud, but the skills that they use are the same skills that a network engineer would use in your data center. They're the
Right.
same skills that a network storage manager, someone who manages network storage in a large enterprise. They're the same skills, right? So it's all the same things. It's just instead of in a data center, it's on someone else's computer in the cloud, the magic space up there.
Yeah. That could be another whole conversation, hour long. What is the cloud? Yeah.
Anytime anyone asks me, I'm like someone else's computer.
Yep. I
That's
guess that's
all the
the
cloud is.
simplest way, right? Yeah. There you go. So, do you like your job? Do you like what you do? Did you like your jobs leading up to this point?
I have so I mentioned earlier I've had a lot of jobs where I was present for a number of years. I liked all of those jobs. This is the first job that I like for reasons that aren't tied to delivery and technology. I like leading this group,
Yeah.
right? And to say I lead them, I just get out of their way. But
Right.
whatever you want to call it, I really enjoy seeing them succeed at delivering awesome stuff. It took me a long time to get there. I was in this role either in title or in action basically the day I walked in the door at Humana. But I had just come from a job where I was delivering technology, and a job from that where I was delivering technology, and a job before that where I was delivering software and software. I was delivering cool stuff. I was doing things, and I'm a creative in general, so I like to create things. I
Yeah,
like to work on something and then be like, I made that. I don't get that anymore from my job,
right.
and it took me a good while to begin to shift my enjoyment, what feeds me, from being able to make a piece cool function or whatever, to making sure that someone else was able to do that without a headache or bureaucratic nightmares or whatever it is that I'm defending them from on a given day.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. And it is definitely a different skill set. I haven't been a manager for my real job yet. I did manage a project back in college, our senior design build. But even just watching managers or other people, I can see which ones are the engineers at heart and which ones are the MBAs at heart. And that's not a diss on either one because sometimes you need one and sometimes you need the other. And in my previous jobs, often it was the case that the engineer got promoted into the manager job, and an MBA person would have been better for the job because the engineer didn't know how to deal or help people, right? And vice versa. Sometimes there was an MBA businessy person who didn't have any idea what the team was actually doing, and
Mm-hmm.
so they couldn't even make educated decisions about how. Anyway, again, beside the point. It sounds like you're doing a great job transitioning from one kind of into the other.
Well, I don't want to do it though. Let me be absolutely clear. So I do that on my day job, and then I come home and write code, because
Yeah, yeah.
I need I still have to feed that part of my personality. I guess I'm not able to not get in and play with code. You were talking about AI earlier, and I do a lot of software development at home, and I've recently turned on the integration for VS Code, and Copilot, and
Hmm.
my mind is blown daily by the
Oh
code that
yeah.
it writes because it has really great context within that IDE, right?
Yep. Yep.
Usually, when you give something a prompt, it just works in the prompt and maybe the sources that prompt generates. But when you're doing it in software development, it's looking at this code that you're writing and everything that references it, and maybe the entire project, and making some really impressive guesses at what you're trying to do.
Right.
I've been really impressed with it.
Are you scared that it's going to take away your job?
Well, no, because my job isn't to write code anymore.
Okay, okay, there you go. Should
um,
I guess what I should say is should we be scared that AI is going to wipe out all of the development
so
types
I,
of jobs?
I talk to a lot of technology people about AI, and most of them are developers or engineers who write code. When I say engineers write code, I'm talking about uh, people who are in engineering roles, but because of their role, they write Python scripts or other scripts, Ruby scripts, etc., to make their lives easier. That's
Hmm.
classic engineer work right there. Like, let me hack out a terrible script that just gets this done.
Yeah,
That's what, and they all say the same thing. The only people who need to worry about AI today are bad developers,
there you go. Yeah,
because AI can be a bad developer all day long.
yeah,
Um, AI cannot be a good developer, at least not today. Um, Tomorrow's a new day, but
yeah,
today
yeah,
you really shouldn't have to worry if you're a good developer.
yeah. I agree. For me, it's just been I have that same perspective that if I can make my job easier, or if I can develop myself out of a job, or rather, if my job is one that could be automated by writing a script, I don't want the job anyway. So I'm going to write the script and find something else to be working on, right?
Well, and
And
you can do
AI
that
just makes that easier.
absolutely, and you can do that. I mean, that's a great perspective, right? Thinking about, hey, how can I automate myself out of this toil?
Yeah,
Um,
right.
because the reality is that if you really care about what you're working on, you care about the product, you care about the space that you're in, automating yourself out of that tool doesn't mean you're going to sit down and do nothing. You're not going to go play video
Yeah.
games. You're going to go find another way to be valuable. And that's tremendous. And if your leader can see that, I mean, I will tell you that if I see that in my guys, and I do, I say guys, I have a multi-gender team, but when I see that, that is the sort of thing that I key on when we're talking about, end of year reviews and promotions, et cetera, is that sort of work. Because that's just a tremendously valuable and self-inspired way to attack your job.
Yeah. Great. Okay, let's talk about your job a little bit more outside of what you actually do every day. So, first, how much do you make?
Um, well, I'll tell you, I'll take you through my career because
Okay,
I
great.
think that might be an interesting way to approach that. So I started working minimum wage, as I mentioned earlier, doing the most menial of technology jobs, but it paid the bills. Um, and then I jumped to my first real development job, and I made $50,000 a year. Um, it was another probably 10 years. So we're talking about from 22 to 32, maybe it was 22 to 30, but it was right around that area that I finally made six figures, which was a huge thing for me. I didn't touch on this earlier, and I don't want to dig in too deep on it, but I didn't go to college. You talked about education earlier. I didn't go to college,
Yeah.
and I actually didn't finish high school. My mom had a stroke when I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school. I had two younger siblings, and I had to quit school to go to take care of my siblings. And so I went from that to but I was already a tech guy, right? So
Right.
I was. It's not like I was like, oh, I found time in between my full time jobs stocking shelves at Kroger, et cetera. No, I was already kind of sharp in the technology space because I was self identified nerd. But um, but hitting six figures was just nutty. I grew up in the projects, so
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
was huge milestone, and especially at that time, right? So this is when I was 30. This was like just in the 2000s, right after 9/11, right in that area, and that was huge. And so that was, and it took me from then until my so. Trying to think of the timelines here. So from then until I left Kindred for me to make 125, which again, another big number, right? It's just
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
quarters, those we tend to think of things in that way. So that was a big number. Um, and when I came to Humana, I was making when I came to Humana, I took a job. I was making right at 150. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
and so I'll say I'm quite a bit higher than that now. Just due to one promotion and
And your
you know,
raises
and
and
your
yeah.
raises and whatnot. What I will say is, you talked a little about benefits, and I think that's your next question anyway. So I'll just dive into
Yeah.
that. We are very fortunate at Humana. I think you know that
Yeah.
our benefits package is fantastic. They match. I just found out the other day about some matching program that I didn't even know about. I've been there 6 years. So there's this program where if you put in 20, I think it's $20 or $25 a paycheck.
It's 20. Yeah, that's relatively new. I think they started that last year, but it's just like an emergency savings account. They'll match $20 a paycheck.
And there's no conditions on it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can use that to buy your video card next year when they come
Yeah.
when the 50 whatever series drops down to a reasonable price. You could just go buy a video card. It's
Right.
completely nutty, and that's just one
Yeah.
of many benefits. But I will say, as you get up into the higher roles at this organization, you start getting into a bonus program, right? So they've got a
Hmm.
great bonus program. Eventually, and this role I'm in and now is the first time I experienced it at Humana, and to my knowledge, it's probably about the first time you ever experience it at Humana. You start to see equity awards and things like that.
Hmm.
So all of those things add up to a pretty. I tell you what, Anthony of 1997 would be pretty happy with where Anthony of
Right.
2025 landed.
Do you feel like your job's pretty stable then? Stable and secure?
I do. Um, I think that's so. when you're in an organization like Humana, they invest heavily in technology spaces, platforms, whatnot. If you're fortunate enough to be tied to one of those spaces, the stability of your job goes up, right?
Hmm.
Humana couldn't stop doing cloud stuff tomorrow if they wanted to, right?
Right.
We just had I won't name any technologies, but we just had a technology that was bought by another company that is known for taking over technologies and jacking up the price on them. They
Yeah.
bought that technology a couple years ago, and we were deeply invested in that space.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we wanted to get out immediately, but that was unreasonable. So we had to negotiate a contract that gave us room to breathe so that we could come up with a plan to get out completely. It's a
Right.
multi-year project. So I would see the writing on the wall long before. I feel like anyway, I would see the writing on the wall long before any instability came to my job. So yeah, I feel pretty stable.
Yeah. So I think I know what technology you're talking about, and again, I won't say it just like you won't now, but we're in that transition, and it's kind of hard. And I can see the huge benefits. Like we should have done this transition before anyway. So yes, I feel it. Here's
In the
yeah, go
space,
ahead.
well, in the spaces that I'm in right now, so I've been involved in two RFPs, and those RFPs are with companies that today we have a great relationship with, or
Hmm.
they've all settled down to one or two participants, so I can say that with confidence. These are companies we have great relationships with, but who's gonna buy them in 6 months or a year?
Yeah,
And when we make these decisions to get in bed with these companies and these technologies, you always have to have this feeling in the back of your mind that are we making the right call for now that's going to burn us in a year or 6 months or 2 years or whatever the timeline looks like. um, it's I don't know, it's something you feel kind of helpless against, because the reality is that there's no way to read the tea leaves and determine the future.
yeah. You
So
can't tell the future. Yeah. So here's one other thing. I want to just take a step back, and then we'll end up. This has already been longer than I was expecting. I really appreciate it. You didn't go to college, and I wonder if nowadays you have a perspective or an opinion about the importance of a college education or higher education. And I have an opinion that I'll tell you after, but I'm interested in your take first.
my opinion is that there are very few fields where a college education will benefit you. If now I say that, let me be clear, will benefit you in the sense that you will be better at that thing because you went to college.
Yeah,
Now, it will behoove you in many industries to go to college just so that you'll get a shot, because your
yeah,
resume won't make it through the AI filter uh, without that degree. So that's the tricky bit. I have two boys. They're both high school age. My oldest is he's intending to go into the trades, and I got to be honest with you, I was very excited to hear that.
yeah.
I wanted him to become a nerd like me, and he is a nerd. Don't get me wrong, he's a nerd. But I wanted him to be a software developer. I wanted him to get deep in technology, but I wouldn't have necessarily, I wouldn't have given him the advice to go get a degree from some great engineering school, because the reality is that you're going to learn to problem solve. That's what you're going to learn.
Yeah, yeah,
What you're not going to learn is a useful technology space that you can apply to a job, because most of what you learn is going to be stale and no longer in use by the time you get to the real world. And you're going to put yourself in such tremendous debt. So when he said he was going to go into the trades, I was like, my guy.
yeah. Nice. My perspective after having spent way too much time in higher education, I spent 5 years to get an undergraduate in mechanical engineering, and then 3 more years to get a master's degree and an MBA. And I also served a mission for 2 years, which delayed it a little further.
Wow.
And so after all of that, I can kind of see where college is definitely valuable, and it was a great experience and I loved it. However, I feel like most people who go to college uh, maybe can get too much of the experience of, yeah, woohoo, we're moving away from home or with friends. This is great, which is an important part of college. I'm not going to minimize that, but they're missing out on the education or the other benefits, right? You, like you said, you put it on your resume, that'll get you in the door, but often when you actually sit down in the job interview, the person is way less interested in your grades and way more interested in, so what have you done? And
Yeah.
so it was really interesting to hear your story, how you started and you followed your opportunities even though it wasn't college, and you were able to grow your career because you developed the skills you needed throughout. And sometimes college can help with those skills, and often college doesn't actually help with those skills, depending on your major and kind of the career path and everything else. So,
I think college also gives you an opportunity. Opportunity is the right word. You use that in what I followed, but there's so many opportunities in the college space to increase the value of your time there over.
yeah,
I attended some classes and I got this GPA and I got this piece of paper when I was done. Um, Obviously, loads of learning opportunities because you're not limited to what you're taking coursework in, but also the relationship building in certain
right.
spaces. This is especially true in the business space, the law space. The relationships you build in college with your professors, with that group of people, will very likely shape your first career move in when you leave college, and many after that if you let it. Um,
Yeah,
and that could go both ways, I suppose. But there's a lot of opportunities there, and a lot of kids, like you said, they're just going through the motions. It's a big social thing for them. They just know they have to do it because dad said I had to do it, mom said I had to do
yeah,
it,
yeah,
and that's the real unfortunate thing. Just I think that's a cultural thing more than a even
yeah.
college thing. But
I agree.
we'll see what my youngest says. He says he doesn't know what he wants to do. I'm like, well, trade school's a lot cheaper than college, so I'm not upset about the payday.
Sure is. Yeah. Nice. That's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Anthony Sullivan this week and learned some from his career. I especially love how he was able to chase the opportunities as they came up, even though he started in a pretty rough spot at the beginning of his career. Again, if you have any questions for him, go ahead and leave them down in the comments and we'll try to get those all answered. And don't forget to share this channel with your career curious friends.